All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and start with the Milton Community Enhancement Grant Subcommittee. Very easy to do a call to order today. You have myself and Commissioner Wright here to be able to move on with this conversation around our community enhancement grants. So first up on the, Commissioner Wright, did you want to say something before the presentation?
Yes, Madam Chair. If this is helpful at all for us to recall what has been said in the last meeting, so that I thought maybe we could bring ourselves up to speed with what has been, very briefly, what has been discussed before we get to that.
Absolutely. I'll let you go ahead. I think you have notes right in front of you, so
Yes,
please
ma'am.
do.
Okay, so in the last meeting, we had this was March 19, we heard from CEO Clay Perry as well as our grant coordinator, Tanya Blunt, just giving us an update on how the Milton Community Enhancement Grant Program works currently. And then we also heard from from Mayor Harris and members of the administration. In our discussion as commissioners, we heard a number of general ideas. And so I have that Commissioner Clay Bibbs talked about improving our end-of-year reporting, and specifically instead of invoices and receipts being suggested, they become required. That was one recommendation. Commissioner Avant talked about how do we report the impact that the program has had in terms of number served and what was accomplished, or even less quantitative but maybe more qualitative stories. In addition, could we improve that year-end reporting? And then she also talked about, could we provide some kind of budget template to the applicants so that this board has a better sense of what's being requested or how it's being envisioned to be used. I talked a little bit about, again, that sort of that end-of-year reporting. Could we even just do a list, have them all in one place where we're reporting out the list of applicants who received funds and what the results were? Chairman Whaley also talked about maybe improving our application process, specifically to filter out any conflicts of interest. But then also he spoke about compliance measures, and if the funds were used according to what was proposed, and then also what was the result, like what was the impact made. Those were the main things that I had. I know that you had moved for this board to follow up with Chairman Caswell with specific recommendations. I'm not sure that has really happened in the interim, or at least if it has, it hasn't gotten to me. But I know we have some guests today, Madam Chair, that would like to present to us. So I know that's next on the agenda, but I just wanted to bring us up to speed. The last thing I had was also that we kind of broke this down into some categories of interest. And so the categories that I had were, one, the application process, again, around maybe prohibited uses, maybe conflict of interest. Second category was compliance, so like compliance with the program, and so that could include the invoices or receipts, and just accountability that the funds were used as requested. And then with implementation, we talked about where does the mayor's signature need to be. He's signing the resolution, we heard, but perhaps not the grant contract. Does that need to be focused? So the implementation was the third category. And the fourth category was evaluation. And so again, reporting out maybe the list of recipients at the end of the year, as well as the impact that they made.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright, for that wrap up. Thank you for those notes. I will just encourage, because I don't see Commissioner Caswell here today, but I do want to encourage his staff person to follow up with getting those suggestions in, because I think that was what we were looking for around getting next steps around being able to have real recommendations to take to the whole body. So do want to just say that I do know that Administrator Anderson is here, so between those two, someone should make sure that we get that in writing with those 4 categories that we all agreed upon last subcommittee around what suggestions we have in order to be able to move forward. Like for this committee to kind of close out as soon as possible so that we're not still in the same loop regarding this particular conversation. With that being said, we do have a presenter here today. Want to bring forth John Donovan, Senior Vice President of Slingshot. If Mr. Donovan, if you can come up with your team, and please, if you can, again, reintroduce yourself to us, state your name and address for the record, along with yourself and your team, and then we can go into your presentation.
There we go. All right. Jared Barnett, I'm the president and CEO of Slingshot Memphis, and our place of business is 802 Roselle Street, Memphis, Tennessee, 38104.
I'm Lara Bullock, Activation Manager at Slingshot Memphis.
And John Donovan, Senior Vice President at Slingshot Memphis.
Welcome. So we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very much appreciate the opportunity to share and have a chance to contribute some of our experience here in the community. And so the way we wanted to kind of share is a little bit about Slingshot, just to provide context for why we have knowledge in this space and how we work with the community, and then want to share perspectives based on what was discussed in the last subcommittee meeting, our perspective on ways that the County Commission might be able to address those different areas, and then also ways that we feel we might be able to contribute to that and help in some form to share that as well. So we'll start just a little bit about what Slingshot is. So we were created here in Memphis. We're a local homegrown organization to help our community understand what's effective at fighting poverty. And our belief is that one of the challenges we've had with overcoming our long-term high rates of poverty is we haven't always known what works and what's most effective. So therefore, we're not able to always support the things that help people the most out of poverty. And we believe that people experiencing poverty should have access to the most effective services if we want to see their lives change. And so we have a very unique approach where we incorporate data, research, analysis in a rigorous way to try and help revolutionize how effective poverty fighting is. And so the 3 primary services we offer is we do program evaluation for nonprofits. This is to help improve their effectiveness and the outcomes that they provide for their participants. We do that through a very rigorous study called an impact study that we've created that measures various aspects of what they do. It quantifies the benefits that they're able to create for their participants and gives those organizations a great way of understanding their current effectiveness, but then also how do they get better. That's a big part of our work. The second thing we do is we help advise social impact investments. And so we work with individual philanthropists, we work with foundations, we work with corporations, and we help them understand if you're trying to achieve this goal for the city and with your funding, these are the ways that allow you to do that the best, either the types of programs you should support or the organizations that are most effective at what you want to do. And the goal behind that is to increase financial resources to the most effective poverty fighting efforts so that they have the ability to do more in what they do. And then the third thing we do is strategic consulting. So we will partner with organizations across the community to help them implement plans that are evidence-based and help them achieve greater poverty fighting outcomes. So again, if an organization wants to help achieve X, we're able to help them build a plan that relies on what's been researched to be most effective, how do you apply that to Memphis, and help them answer questions that we may not know the answer to. And so that's at a summary a bit of what we do in terms of how we try and revolutionize poverty fighting effectiveness. Next, I wanted to jump just a little bit about who we serve. And so currently, we work with over 50 local nonprofits and their fight against poverty. And we think of fighting poverty very broadly. And so if it improves the health or income of someone, that is considered poverty fighting. And so we'll highlight a little bit of what that is later, but it's a broad group, which you can tell by some of these nonprofits that we work with. And so by working alongside so many nonprofits, we've got a great understanding of kind of the nonprofit poverty fighting ecosystem here in the city. But then we also have a way to help them understand, again, what they're doing is effective and more effective. And so on the slide here, the chart here on the right is actually a screenshot of our website, where we provide, in essence, kind of a results grid of how effective they are at the different aspects of fighting poverty. And so it's, again, a resource for them and a resource for the community, because all of this is published at no cost on our website and available for people to see. And so that gives us a breadth of understanding across the city. And in fact, we actually work with nonprofits that are in basically every district that this, 90% of the county districts are covered by the nonprofits we work with. And then in terms of our philanthropic advisory support, so I mentioned this before, but these are some of the foundations that we work with that use our reports to help inform their grant making. And so they often will ask the nonprofits to submit their Slingshot impact study, and that information helps decide how much and who they support based on that knowledge. And then with corporations, we work with those corporations to help them think about who they support in the community in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And so FedEx is an example here of an organization we've been working with for months now to help them rethink their corporate giving here in the community so that they can have the impact that they want to have with the magnitude of support they provide here. And then the other thing that we do here is we actually provide a community fund as well. And so we call this the Accelerated Impact Fund. And this is where anyone in the community can contribute to this fund. And the benefits for them is that 100% of those funds get allocated to the nonprofits we study. We don't take a haircut or a management fee for that. But we allocate those funds based on the effectiveness of the organization. So more effective nonprofits that we work with receive a greater share of the funds. And so it's a way to invest philanthropically based on impact. And so since our inception back in 2017, we've raised almost $8 million through this fund. And because we allocate it based on how effective the organizations are, we've been able to create over $16 million in poverty fighting benefits with those funds because of how we were able to give it to the nonprofits. And so that's a little bit of context just about Slingshot and kind of our experience that we think is relevant for the subcommittee today.
So again, John Donovan with Slingshot. Based on the last meeting where we heard input from various commissioners about the program, with the 4 areas that were highlighted, application, compliance, implementation, and evaluation, we sort of found 2 key areas of opportunity broadly that we'll deconstruct here momentarily. The first area of opportunity that we would see is in this grant-making infrastructure. And these are some adjustments, some recommendations that we think could be implemented on the front end, but not necessarily need a lot of ongoing maintenance. Certainly refinement's always positive, but these are things that we think of sort of as one-time adjustments that could really help move the needle. The second group of opportunities would be some of the ongoing measurement, and the reason this would need to be ongoing is because this is an annual program. The investments in the organizations changes over years, and the organization's performance also change over the years. So if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of walk through the deconstructed version of the first set of recommendations, and then my colleague Lara will talk about the second set. So within the grant-making infrastructure, we identified 5 opportunities that we think would unlock greater impact and transparency for this program. The first would be just to define the grant program objectives. So we recognize that there is some language already in existence, but really to get buy-in from the collective commissioners to understand what are we trying to achieve. Therefore, all the evaluation impact on the back end can be used to then go back to that, what's our North Star in the first place. And so the second thing would be to analyze the existing portfolio of grants, right? In order to understand where we are and to set that baseline, it's really imperative that we know who's currently receiving funding, to what degree are they receiving funding, which sectors of the nonprofit ecosystem are represented, and to what degree are they represented. And then if we look at kind of the map of Shelby County, right, where are constituents or where are participants being served, and potentially where are they not being served to the same degree. And so before we really understand how to deploy resources moving forward, we have to understand where are current resources being deployed. The third thing would be to refine the grant application. And this is where some of the things that came out of that last meeting about filtering conflicts of interest, having clear statements of ethics that folks commit to, where you would filter on the front end the types of nonprofits that would be eligible. But also, if you've already set up those grant program objectives, what you've done is said, hey, if you want to apply for this program, here's what we're looking for. And so ultimately you streamline the efficiency of this process by setting up a real clear application. And ultimately, when we think about compliance, when we think about measurement, when we think about impact, a strong grant application sets the tone for all those things, because what you want to do in a grant application is say, tell us where you are today and tell us how an investment from this body would help you get to that next level. So then when you get to the evaluation stage, you can go back to, okay, well, tell me where you were and tell me where you are now. And sometimes those investments are about maintenance, just keeping the sustainability. Sometimes they're about increasing who you serve. Sometimes they're about scaling programs. But all of that evaluation is dependent upon a really strong data collection process on the front end where you can say, here's where you were, now where are you? The fourth would be installing these reporting mechanisms so that you as a governing body knows what you're looking for that nonprofit, what they need to report, the cadence that they should report that, and then how you all as a governing body would review that. And I think it's really important to keep in mind what you don't want to do, what we don't want to do as a community is burden our nonprofit community by having them complete numerous reports with numerous data requests that don't actually answer the questions we want to get answered. And so this wouldn't be necessarily the volume of reporting mechanisms, but the value and the consistency and the quality of the data that we're looking for these nonprofits. Lastly, you'll be documenting the process. We want the public to be confident in what's happening. We want, as a collective constituency, to understand how our taxpayer dollars going to nonprofits to boost the quality of life, the income mobility, the social mobility, and the health for Shelby County residents. And so the last piece of this process is just making sure that all of this is documented for sustainability purposes as figures on this body change, but also so that anybody in Shelby County understands what this process looks like and how this analysis takes place.
All right, now that we've got the grant infrastructure set, we need to measure how the ongoing impact will be with this new process. So Slingshot, we are uniquely positioned to help the county commission increase the return on investment for the grants into the community. The first way we will do this is through analyzing the portfolio. So not just understanding which commissioners give to which organizations, but also where in the county the grants are given, and then also looking into the sectors that are given. So are the grants given towards workforce development, health and well-being, social needs, understanding where the giving is going, and continuing to analyze that so that way we can fill in the gaps and measure the impact within those different sectors. The second thing we're going to do with the ongoing impact measurement is to evaluate the investment impact. So there are current nonprofits that are already within the Slingshot portfolio. We have the relationship capital and also information to provide a rigorous ROI for the funds that are allocated. So we already have that knowledge, and we're uniquely positioned to tell you more about how those funds may be used. Then there's also some nonprofits that will fall outside of the portfolio, and we understand that they may not fit where we are today, under the Slingshot umbrella, but we can explore continued alternative options on how we will measure the impact of the funds that are given as well there too. So we're adaptable and agile, that we can move into also understand how the impact is under the nonprofits that are not currently within our portfolio. And then 3, we also understand that the environment changes. So the solution that we may propose today, or in our initial phase, it may change with the needs of the people. And so we want to be adaptable. So we'll continue to measure and refine the process as needed, given that the environment and the needs of the people may change. And so we'll also have a solution that we will continue to update and adjust to ensure that we are achieving the objectives set out.
Right, and I can wrap this up. These are just some more detailed slides with substantial text, and so we won't go through these in this moment. But if you go past this slide, and then one more. Perfect. So we'll wrap up with this. This isn't the type of return on investment analysis that we specialize in at Slingshot. And so actually what we've done here is on the left, identified the poverty fighting sectors. And again, as Jared alluded to earlier, we think of poverty fighting as active, proactive, and reactive. There's a multitude of ways to fight poverty. And so the way that we think about the nonprofit ecosystem is that if you're working education, workforce development, economic development, legal and civic needs, housing and stabilization, health and physical well-being, social needs, and in the natural environment, you are fighting poverty. Even if you as a nonprofit don't categorize yourself as a poverty fighter, we know these things help fight poverty for those that are currently experiencing poverty and for those at risk of experiencing poverty. So that's how we think about the ecosystem. And then on the right, what you can see is a breakdown of a return on investment analysis. So what we did here is we took a Memphis City Council grant and looked at how one of their council members allocated their funds across the organizations in our portfolio. The grant allocation is the amount they invested. The estimated benefit cost ratio is our understanding of the return on that investment. And so in that right column is the actual benefits of that investment that that council person can then take back into the community and said, when I invested X amount into this nonprofit, here's the benefits that that created. And then underneath that can talk about what those benefits were and how that was calculated. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for the listening public, I didn't want to interrupt you, but can you just say one more time? I know, John, you just did that slide, but just say your names and titles one more time for the listening public. It's just for the record, because some people are listening, some people are watching on YouTube.
Great. So I'm Jared Barnett. I'm the president and CEO of Slingshot Memphis.
Lara Bullock, Activation Manager at Slingshot Memphis.
And John Donovan, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Development at Slingshot Memphis.
Thank you so much. I do have commissioners in the queue. First, let me just say that thank you for the presentation. The last slide, I think, probably was the most helpful, being able to really think about how we could maybe partner together. What you did not include, which I'm sure this is maybe an ask, unless you're saying that you want to do this work for free.
So on that regard, part of that would depend on the scope of work. We would need something to cover our costs if we were to partner together.
Too many microphones are on. Okay, there we go. Thank you.
But depending on the scope of work that the county commission would be interested in doing with us would dictate how much that would be. So,
all right, thank you for that. Commissioner Thornton, you're in the queue.
Thank you. So I was trying to listen in as I'm double booked right now in another meeting. I have a lot of questions as I've kind of just seen Slingshot come on the scene and be a part of dialogue and just the way that we operate here in Memphis and Shelby County. So it's like on one hand, I recognize the need for us to figure out what our impact is. And then on the other hand, I also see some glaring disconnects in how Slingshot is building out a new infrastructure. I loosely heard you mention the foundations. They're taking people who are, it sounds like, Slingshot verified and prioritizing those agencies as agencies to invest in. And so when I think about me coming from a low to income census tract and all of the social service providers in my district, as I saw, I don't know if that was an exhaustive list of partners that you have worked with, or if there are more organizations. When I just looked at the list, there were a lot of city and countywide players, not a lot of neighborhood-based entities. And one of the things that I see a great need for is for us to build capacity from the neighborhood level. So when we think about who would be primed and positioned to even want to step up to be evaluated by Slingshot, a number of organizations at the neighborhood level, they don't have everything put together, but they're doing impactful work. And a lot of times I see these citywide and countywide players going to find the neighborhood connectors, the people with social influence at the neighborhood level to do the work and meet their figures. And so I take a lot of issue in us cherry picking people for their social connections without building capacity for them to have their own infrastructure. And I do think for this particular body, being a predominantly Black body, that we have to think about the partners that we bring in and the infrastructure that we roll out for people to have to play against. I wouldn't want people to have a scarlet letter because according to Slingshot's metrics, they get D, F rated because they were raggedy when they showed up to you and then they needed additional supports. I know personally I'm struggling to be able to get monies that are discretionary dollars into entities in my neighborhoods because they don't have their stuff together. So I'm not quite sure, and I'll do my due diligence to sit down with your team. But what stands out to me is a team that looks very different from my neighborhood coming in to say who's worthy to be able to get dollars. And I don't know if all three of y'all are native Memphians. I don't know if y'all live in low to moderate income census tracts. I don't know what your connections are to this poor Memphis narrative. But there are needs that they have, and the first need isn't to be judged. And so I do think that with Slingshot, there has to be a delicate balance here between evaluation and cultivation. And I just would like to hear that more as we continue to potentially invest in some type of collaborative partnership at the county level. So I'll let that be the first pass through to see if there's anything that y'all are doing that's thoughtful and in that realm. And then I'll follow up with some additional questions.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to take an initial response and then let my team respond. But I think
State your name and then your response.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so Jared Barnett. And I think the first thing is that we're very careful in how we frame our work. And so we don't ask foundations to just fund organizations that we work with or not. What we do is give them additional information to make the decisions that they're going to make. And so it's a more informed decision is what we try and empower funding organizations with to help them think of that. And then in terms of the nonprofits, we're not a binary good or bad nonprofit. It's here's where you're at today and here's how you can get more effective. And our biggest advocates are actually the nonprofits we work with. They are the ones who often are the ones talking about our work with their colleagues, with the other nonprofit executives they might know. And so it is very much a collaborative relationship and one about getting better. It's not a judging, it's not a good or bad. It's we're going to fight poverty more effectively because at the end of the day, our ultimate constituent as Slingshot is people experiencing poverty and making sure they can access the most effective services to help them with whatever is keeping them in poverty. That's the end game for us. And so our work with nonprofits is a very collaborative approach to do that. And then in terms of the types of nonprofits we work with, it's varied, both in size and in and location. So we work with some nonprofits that have one or two people on staff. So a good example of that is Lifeline to Success in Fraser, where it's predominantly Vanessa Brown is the main full-time person there. And we work with them to help her institutionalize what she's doing, find opportunities to enhance it. We also work with large nonprofits like a Porter Leith as well. But that range is something that's important to us, and our work is free of charge to the nonprofits. So it's not exclusive in any way. The main thing that a nonprofit needs to work with us is time, because in order to do a good study, we need to make sure we understand their organization. And that's something we pride ourselves in, is that the nonprofits we work with will tell you that we know their organization better than anybody other than themselves, because we invest the time to make sure that we really know what they do, how they do it, why they do it. and that. And so I think that's a big piece, and I completely agree with you, Commissioner Thornton, that you can't just look at things from a cookie cutter approach. You can't just kind of look at an organization and say, well, they're going to cover the whole county. That neighborhood element is very important, and so we try and identify some of those organizations as we've grown, and we invite those organizations to express interest in us, and try and find that balance of place-based, very specific focus versus those that might serve a broader part of the county. John and Lara? And then maybe the last thing I'll say is just our team. We have 3 of the 14 people on our team here today, but our team's a pretty large mix of people in terms of backgrounds, experiences, education. We have many of us who are from Memphis, many of us who are not, that have come to Memphis for this work. We have people of different ethnicities and genders, and so the diversity is a really important piece for us, because if we're all doing the same thing, it doesn't work. So I have a business background, whereas other people on our team have worked at a frontline nonprofit and know the experience of what it's like to provide direct services, and we try and leverage those different skill sets in our work, so not one kind of background dominates, but that we try and mesh those different experiences, because we recognize I don't know certain things because I don't have that experience, where other people on my team won't know some of my background and the things that I know because of their experience. And so it's important to us that we don't anchor too heavily on any one type of background or experience, but that we try and do a good job of blending that in any kind of decisions or work that we do.
Thank you for that answer, Commissioner Thornton. You're back in the queue.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that response. Can you provide us with the list of your leadership team and the nonprofits that you have worked with? And I'm assuming since y'all deal with data, are you able to place that either in our districts or by zip codes that we could see what nonprofits are currently connected to Slingshot? And I feel like I distinctly heard you say something about how the foundations are some type of way working with Slingshot affiliates to be able to figure out how to more efficiently allocate their resources. So there seems to be a working relationship between Slingshot vetted organizations and just general applicants, with some type of preference being towards Slingshot, affiliates. And so I could see the culture here finding itself saying, I mean, who wouldn't want to invest in someone who has been deemed to be a more efficient poverty fighter? So it's forcing people to have to participate with this particular entity, which is just an interesting new infrastructure here. I'm just trying to figure out who Slingshot, that everyone should be run through the Slingshot wash to be able to access resources. So, that's an interesting buy-in that you're asking us as a city and county to do. So I have more questions about, where did y'all come from? Is this something that is local to Memphis, or is this a national entity? Can you tell us, and this might have been a part of what I missed, but when does Slingshot come into Shelby County? If you could give a little bit more context for that.
Yeah, thank you, Jared Barnett, and I can respond to some of those questions, Commissioner Thornton. In terms of partnerships, we don't have a partnership where there's preferential treatment with any organizations and foundations.
But that's on your end. Once you provide information
Yep.
that entities have been through Slingshot, what they do on the back end is their internal process, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
So
we don't
you
try
can-
and we
you
just
can-
try and provide information, not decisions.
Right. So it could also be true that as you provide that information, that these foundations select their allocations according to what Slingshot has provided.
Our hope is that our work will help influence decision-making for sure. So that aspect is true. But again, it's meant to be in a way to have more information to make a decision, not a right or wrong. But we also find that a lot of the nonprofits we work with use our work in their fundraising efforts. And so they often will, unsolicited, submit that And one clarification on that is that we're not proposing that the county commission only support the organizations that we work with. What we're saying is that because we have that breadth of experience, we can help the county think about the types of outcomes you want to achieve and how you might collect data to help you do that. But we, in no way would we want to say that you should only fund the nonprofits that we have a partnership with. That is something that, again, is those funding decisions are up to each body, each organization, each individual. And we just want to be a resource to help in terms of achieving the objectives and outcomes that you'd want with that funding. And then responding to your questions around kind of our history, we are only based in Memphis. We were founded here back in 2017 by native Memphian who grew up here. Our board, most of our board are all native Memphians. About half of our team is. And we are focused on Memphis. So our goal is to help Memphis. At some point in the future, we might consider sharing what we've learned with other communities, but we don't want to do that until we've had the impact we want here. And so we are heavily ingrained in the community and in helping the organizations here in the city be able to serve their participants as best they can. And in fact, a good example is last week we hosted an event called the Impact Awards, where we invited the whole community to come and celebrate the nonprofits that are working with us. And so we had all the organizations got recognized on the stage. We had about 400 to 500 people that were at the event. It's the second year we've done that. And we try and shine a light on them because they're the ones doing the hardest work, right? They're providing the direct services. They're the ones working in the trenches. And we're just trying to be a support for them. And so we don't pretend that we're the end-all be-all. We just see ourselves as something that can augment and support any nonprofit that wants to understand what they're doing and how effective it is and how they can be more effective is the end of the day what we're trying to achieve. But Memphis is home. Memphis is where we're focused, and Memphis is where we want to see the change.
Thank you for your answer. So if I'm hearing correctly, there is an opportunity, because I saw in your presentation, you're saying you would do one-on-one with commissioners, because each one of us give differently, quite honestly. So there's an opportunity maybe to understand how we give, because I'm gonna pick on Commissioner Wright here for a minute. Like, he probably gives more in lump sums to organizations in larger amounts of dollars, versus I give more in smaller sums to people who are directly, as close as possible, who touch District 11. But at the same time, I also give to larger entities who do work across the county. So in that one-on-one, is there an opportunity to really kind of understand, like, how we give, how I think I'm going to remember in 22, I gave to someone who was a startup nonprofit because she wanted to do some work around people who are trying, women in particular who have been dealing with issues around housing. So she worked directly with them to help them get to the next level of like renting or buying. So, but now at this point, her entity is only 3 years old. So versus me supporting like MTR, who is strong in my community around education. So I'm using me and maybe Commissioner Wright as an example because he does large amounts of money to large organizations. I tend to give smaller amounts to a wide array of organizations. So is there an opportunity for you to craft that per commissioner? Is that what you're saying possibly can happen? I think that's maybe what I'm trying to understand a little bit more.
Yeah, so Jared Barnett, I think there's a couple ways that could go. The original thought and what we've kind of shared here is the idea of doing it, meeting with every commissioner to understand their objectives and looking at where there are commonalities across the commissioners to the point where we can say as a program, these are the primary types of objectives that are trying to be achieved, while leaving room for the individuality of each commissioner to support the things that they're passionate about. Separately, yes, there's absolutely an opportunity that we could also work with each commissioner to develop kind of an approach of saying, well, this is how you like to give and what you like to give to. We can be a resource to help you think about what organizations might be in your district, might be doing certain things, and we have a pretty broad understanding of the ecosystem, so we could be a support there in a way to help achieve the outcomes that you want. So we wouldn't necessarily say, hey, Commissioner Wright, you should do this. We'll say, what do you want to achieve? And then from what our work that we know, how can we help contribute to you achieving that? That's, at the end of the day, it goes back to outcomes, and we want to help, whether it's individuals or organizations, achieve those outcomes that help people.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright, I'll go to you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So I got a chance to talk with this team. Well, I met you all probably 2 or 3 years ago. You've not worked with the nonprofit I work for, but we've just talked. I do know some nonprofits that you have evaluated, and they've spoken highly of what you've done. But I just think having heard their sort of a version of this presentation before, it has taken me a couple of times to really understand what they're proposing or how they feel that they could assist us. But again, I think going back to the 2 areas that you identified, for me, Madam Chair, I'm thinking a lot about, they broke it up into, one is our application process. I think we've talked as a board that, that's one thing that we could work on is the application process. I think as John said, to kind of set us up for that later reporting and just make sure that we're collecting on the front end all the information that we want to know at the end of the day, where are we having an impact, and then to get back to our objective of being more transparent with our reporting, to be able to provide a list at the end of the year, if only once a year, provide that list of which organizations have been supported to do what kind of work. And that would help me just as one commissioner to be able to say to those who are asking me, hey, I saw this pie chart that got sent to me by the assessor. It says XYZ. Where did this money go? And right now I can't point them anywhere, really. And so, again, I guess, Madam Chair, I would say, number one, they're talking about they could assist us on a one-time basis in reimagining that application process to collect that information, perhaps a more effective way. And then I guess separately, they're talking about could they partner with us around this ongoing measurement of impact. I think both sides are interesting. And it may be that we could start with start with the application and receive some assistance from them there on a one-time basis, and then move in, if we're interested, like what we see, move into the evaluation. That's just my thinking around it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright. I will say that I am interested, if possible, if you could, as you think about what your proposal will look like, looking at some one-time opportunities as well as what it will look like for ongoing. And it definitely, I think that's easier to kind of make a decision. I know Commissioner Wright mentioned application process. I don't have your presentation right in front of me because it's on the system, but I think I would, for me personally, be more interested in the back end. I think the application process is not the issue. I think on the back end, it really is making sure we're asking the right questions at the end as far as follow-up and compliance. That's my personal point of view around it, because the application itself is asking all of the things that is vetted through our legal system around what you can give. So, we can all debate out of the 4 categories, which one is most important, but I think in your proposal, some one-time opportunities and then some overall recurring opportunities. Commissioner Wright, you're back in the queue.
Yeah, I did want to bring up one particular, so I had mentioned to them just in a sort of a one-on-one that of what some of the things that we had talked about, we discussed on this board in our last subcommittee meeting. And so I mentioned in particular the request by some of us, could we make the receipts and the invoices, make that a mandatory piece? They actually said no, they disagreed with that. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to share with the board, why did you say that? Because I was surprised when you said that.
Yeah, John Donovan with Slingshot. I think 2 things come to mind. One is, and we mentioned this earlier, what we don't want to do is make the reporting process cumbersome for the nonprofit who's delivering services fighting poverty. And so we want the process to be as efficient as possible. And having to produce receipts aren't always the most efficient way to show the impact. The other thing that is a challenge is if it's just receipts, that can be manipulated to match whatever price or whatever investment they received. And so what we think about as compliance would be when you are receiving the funds, what will those funds be used for? And then on the back end, were those funds used for that, and what's the data to show that that was impacted? And so if you're saying that the funds are going to be used so that I can go from serving 10 students in an after-school program to 15 students in an after-school program, then to produce a receipt for that is quite cumbersome and challenging. It can be quite nuanced as well. From a reporting standpoint, I think what the community needs to understand is, okay, were those investments used to take that number of students from X to Y? And if not, right, what happens? So how do we continuously improve? And so that's how we would think about the technical kind of receipt collection and some of the pain points that would surface with that.
Thank you for that answer. And Commissioner Wright, ironically, since that meeting, I have had a conversation with Ms. Blunt, who is our grant coordinator, and most are already giving receipts. I think it's a large number who are already giving receipts. So that's an interesting conversation around, like, I think at that moment, that's around compliance versus goal. Are we meeting the actual goal of what we're trying to do? But thank you for that. Commissioner Thornton, you're back in the queue.
I just saw a great email. I just got selected for the Tennessee next class. That's cool. Thanks, guys. So with I don't have the screen set up, but could you go back to the slide? So when we're talking about people's effectiveness in being a poverty fighter, what's the perfect score and what would performance look like to be able to get, I guess, the highest metric according to how you're measuring this? Because one thing that has just stood out to me, I mean, $200,000 is just a drop in the bucket. There's no, if you're serving 20 people, that's great. But if there's a need that's 20,000, then put into context, what is it really doing? So that's my perception of the Milton grants, is the fact that every single person, for what we're actually investing in them to do, they're not even scratching the surface of the total population issue. So that's my pushback. It's just Slingshot is validating underperformance in totality. So what I would love to see is what I would want to push this body, and if it hits the floor, then I'll make this argument more fervently. But we need, if anyone, to contract with someone to be able to tell us how we're serving total populations, and a metric to be able to evaluate people's service to total population. So I would want to know, for anyone who's applying to the Milton grants, what is your understanding of who your total population is, and what percentage of service are you providing? It's my observation that we might be giving 100% funds to someone who's only capable of doing 10% service. So that's the bigger issue to me, is that if you're doing 10% of service to a total population, you should get 10% of the funding. So we have to align, and this is something that goes beyond just Milton grants. I mean, we have a new grants department. Like, I would love to see CSA be able to have some type of evaluation of how it is sourcing dollars and allocating dollars. The Office of Innovation, these different entities that are taking monies and reinvesting them back into the community. And then there's a piece of the redundancy. What does it mean for me in a Milton grant to allocate to someone, and then they're also in the mayor's budget receiving a direct allocation? At what point do we be able to consolidate their comprehensive impact? And so they're just, in government, I would never want to just hang our hat on having Slingshot overlay the Milton grants and overlook all of these other areas that also need to be factored in for us to be able to figure out true total impact. So I'm not sure right now if how we are approaching Slingshot, the scope is right. It seems too small and just really just too insignificant for us to really draw these deep conclusions that we're making about people's ability to get into these communities and truly fight poverty. The Milton grant with these $5,000 that I'm giving to an organization that is a short form organization, like, I don't really think that this is really going to make the best impact in the larger community as a whole. So I'm open to ongoing conversations, but I do think that as we're inviting people, that we should, for however many more committees that we have, we do need to get these other offices to come down to be able to chime into the conversation so that we can figure out how to also impact their processes as well, because I just can't see it being worthwhile just hanging our hat at the Milton grants. For the work that y'all are positioned to do, there's so much more to be done in Shelby County. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thornton. I completely, this is Jared Barnett, completely agree. There's so much in scope here that could be in scope, and we'd love to help with all of that. Our thinking is, could this be a starting spot where we can get to know the county gets to know us? Quite honestly, if we work with you on something and it doesn't produce what you want, then you should stop working with us. But it gives us a chance to kind of get to know each other. And then my experience through my business background is kind of doing a pilot or a smaller starting spot, and then building from there allows you to learn at a smaller scale, so you're not impacting everything at once if you haven't figured out what's works right and what hasn't. And then you can build from there. And we've had conversations with the Office of Innovation and some others. We know who they are, and we'd be thrilled to think about something more holistic and be a support in a way, again, that would be most appreciated. So.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Looking forward to hearing about some next steps. Thank you. All right, we have as another part, I think a follow-up, Ms. Blunt. I don't know if you had some additional things to add to the conversation. Okay, she's looking and saying no. So commissioners, at this time is an opportunity for, if you had any additional questions. Thank you to our presenters. Appreciate your time today. Commissioner Wright.
So I know we initially envisioned there being only one meeting. Now we're on our second meeting, and we had hoped to leave this meeting with some, because I'm not sure the three of us could come out of this with any specific next steps, unless that's just my perspective. But
I think we're aligned. I do think that because we did miss one step, which is the actual email going out with the 4 different opportunities of suggestions. So if that needs to be done, and then as well as because the actual committee chair is not here, I will want to have his input as well. So hate to say it, because we did want to kind of wrap this up, but that means another 2 weeks from now, it would be another subcommittee meeting so that we can actually kind of get to a point of recommendations. So that's the point of where we are. And hopefully, because on that day, there is budget subcommittee, that we as well will get some takers for this to be able to wrap this conversation up for suggestions. So in the meantime, if it did go out and I missed it, forgive me, but I would suggest that we send out with the 4 different buckets that we mentioned at the top of the meeting from your notes, Commissioner Wright, for commissioners to give their suggestions in that, so then we can come back and have a real conversation around recommendations. And that is my request of Administrator Anderson, since he's here, so to make sure that we get that pretty quickly so we can be prepared for the next subcommittee meeting 2 weeks from now.
you want me to rephrase them?
Yeah, if you want, restate them. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Madam Chair. So the 4 categories that I had, and I'm not sure if I'm using the same term everyone has, but the terms I have are: 1 is application process, 2 is compliance, 3 is implementation, and 4 is evaluation. Under the first, application process, I have So the things we talked about are either allowed uses of the funds or perhaps prohibited uses. And second would be any conflict of interest. Is there anything we can do around that question? Filtering out conflicts of interest. Under compliance, I had this notion of receipts and invoices being required. And anything around just any accountability measures. Under implementation, again, we talked about, does the mayor need to be a signer to the grant contract, or do there need to be any other process changes? And then fourth is evaluation, which could also be called reporting, demonstrating the impact we've had, or at the very least just listing out who has received funds.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Thornton, you're in the queue.
Thank you, Chair. I would just add to that, just my desire to see us identify the target populations and having a figure associated with that, so that when people apply, that they're able to name how many they plan to serve, how many persons they plan to directly, or I've seen it in different grant applications. How many will you directly impact? How many will you indirectly impact? But just something that also will just factor in just how many are within the total population that you plan to serve, so that we can start to gauge, I guess, the capacity for them to serve and the extent to which they serve when they evaluate.
Commissioner Thornton, that's a great suggestion. I know you said it for the record on here. My hope is that you also, when the email finally comes to us, that you put it in the email as well. Thank you. Commissioner Wright, are you back in, or are these just left over?
Yeah, just back in once more, just to say that those 4 categories are intended as focus areas for us to think through to then provide recommendations to the body. So I guess you'll be sending, our staff leadership will be sending out an email giving us these 4 categories and requesting from us ideas for improving the process.
That's absolutely the intent. All right, I don't see any additional commissioners in the queue. Thank you so much for your time. This actually adjourns Milton Community Enhancement Grant Subcommittee, and we are officially over at 2:27. Thank you.